Monica Lewinsky is a perfect reminder of how younger generations can keep older generations in check. Because one of the reasons why she is having her story finally, her redemption story, after what the media did to her during the whole Clinton Monica Gate or Lewinsky Gate or the hell they called it. Younger people are the ones, younger women especially, were like, this isn't right. What do you mean she was an intern and had an affair with the president? She was 22. He was 27 years older, and the president. The power dynamics. And when I grew up, she was the biggest joke. Before I go into like more about her, and this isn't a deep dive on her, this is just a reminder. Okay, so many women in the 90s, the early 2000s, but especially the 90s, were destroyed by the media, even though they were the victim. And this right here, okay, the joke, for those of you who don't know the story, if you're younger, Clinton, they never had schmags, but he allegedly stuck the cigar up her. And at the time, side note, I did not drink. I quit drinking for good 24 years ago, but I was experimenting with it in college, and I was trying to also quit smoking. So I started smoking cigars. So I had something to do with my hands when I went to the bars and I hung out with people and could just have fun, and people would leave me alone. And I smoked cigars because I was like, why not? I was a tomboy, whatever. Do you know how I had to start smoking the cigarellos, those nasty things, instead of nicer cigar? Oh, I think this is kind of gross no matter what. But I had to stop smoking these because when this happened, people wouldn't shut up about, you're going to stick that up your... they literally even call me Monica, right? The way this woman was the joke of, the butt of so many jokes, even though the massive power dynamic difference and, what the media put her through, and, everything was like a joke about her. Look at this. Tastes good. And this damn dress. And his baby gravy all over this dress. This was such a huge, annoying, awful story for so long. Much like Lorena Bobbitt. I've actually written an article about this. I've done videos about this. The way this woman was made fun of in the 90s for what? Saving her own life? Because she was in a violent marriage. I mean, this was well documented. This man was going to kill her, so she chopped off his... and threw it out the car window. And honestly, I love that for her. Now, he got it sewn back on because I guess it was cold or whatever. I don't know if it was snow or whatever. But it wasn't until this documentary came out, thanks to Jordan Peele, that she got to tell her story and the story in a way that wasn't humiliating. She got to take back her story, and we got to see what an awful dude her ex has become. He already was awful, but he's so much more awful than I ever imagined. And that is because younger generations who hear about these stories, like Lewinsky and Lorena Bobbitt, are like, I don't know, this actually doesn't seem like she's really at fault here. And then thanks to some filmmakers like Jordan Peele, and just in general, people who have really worked to help these survivors like her get a platform to tell the truth, right? But Lewinsky went into hiding for a long time. I don't know. I cannot jump in these Epstein things. I don't know. It's really hard to stomach. I don't want to do a deep dive. I don't want to read this stuff. I want someone to summarize it for me. But there's multiple accounts that say that Kenneth Starr, the guy Ken Starr, who tortured this woman, tortured her when she was, and she was 22 when this whole thing happened. And then for I don't even know how long this ordeal, this man tortured her. He, apparently, shocker, he knew Epstein, has emails with him. It's leaving messages very affectionate messages. So I don't know what those two were doing. If someone wants to tell me, if you've been reading this stuff, let me know. But he is in the files doing something. If nothing else, just association with this awful dude. This D-bag right here. And now we find out that this dude, Bill Clinton, man, the way he humiliated his wife. And then there's what has this man done? I don't even, at this point, I just assume all of the worst possible things. And him too. I love that they put this photo in here. It could not be more perfect. But it was called the Donica Lewinsky thing because of whatever, him being called Bubba and it being just oral or whatever. I don't know. I don't care. I don't even want to know. I don't want to know. But this is more about Monica. And this is just about her, one of many women in the media who got punished for what men did to them and made fun of relentlessly. Now, just a recap. This is Wikipedia here. I cannot get myself to do a deep dive. I'm not going to do a deep dive on this. But just a recap. She makes on encounters with Clinton 9 occasions from November 95 to 97. Some of those were with Clinton in the house. She told her story to Linda Tripp, and Tripp convinced her to save the gifts he'd given her and to not dry clean. He didn't say dress. Whatever, this dress has we heard so much about this damn dress. Then this famous press conference or whatever, where I did not have affairs with that woman, and Hillary here standing next to her man. It's embarrassing to have a boyfriend. It's embarrassing to have a husband too. I swear, I talk about this all the time. The things that men will do to humiliate you. Just being attached to a man in any way, you are setting yourself up to possibly be humiliated at best. Abused financially, emotionally, physically, sexually, or all those other things at worst, or killed. But at best, the smallest risk is that they will humiliate you and or just exploit your labor. Both of those I think are just awful. But those aren't even abuse technically on the spectrum. God! And the thing is that if she had left him, she would have been forked. This isn't about Hillary, okay? She's got a lot of problems, but if she had stayed by him, she looked awful. And then again, I swear to God, so many things. The way that men triangulate women against each other, right? This guy did this, and what happens? Now it's the women versus the media, women against each other. And he is just admired as the dude who's getting BJs by interns and sticking cigars up them. What? But what I wanted to go over today really quickly, look at my sleeping dog back there, is how it really, I've always said, I feel like we can learn a lot from older women. There's a lot of older women in my life who have mentored me, who have taught me, and also who keep things in perspective, who remind me when history books don't, what women have been through, what they went through to get the rights that I easily was born into. But they fought their asses off for, right? So I love having older women in my life, but I also like having obviously my peers, and then I love having younger women in my life because they oftentimes demand more for us. They keep pushing the needle, right? They're maybe not as set in their ways. They didn't grow up indoctrinated as hard as we did, maybe. Whatever. But it is young people, young women especially, who helped change the narrative around Monica. And she acknowledged that, and I love that. Oh, he's awake. Look at you. He's missed me. I've been gone for a week. In this interview with Vanity Fair, she says, if you can't laugh at yourself, you are so forked. And I agree. This is one of the most important things she learned from this whole thing. After she was cyberbullied relentlessly, just used as a pawn, right? To get I encourage you to look up the story if you don't know this story, if you were not alive at the time or whatever. After all this, she went to graduate school and tried to live a normal life, but eventually came to understand that there was no road back to anonymity. It's that her name was so huge in my generation and everyone who was alive during that yeah. And maybe younger people don't know, but anybody who lived all over the world, this story was blasted all over the world because they tried to impeach him over lying about it. So what I love about what she's done is that she has used this awful thing that she went through and used it as a way to help others deal with their own bullying, or especially women to take ownership of their own story. She's just, this is one reason why I do this work. Is, I can't take back what happened and I can't change it. I will never get justice for, the DV and all that stuff. But what I can do and what I personally enjoy doing is using my story to change the narrative, to educate, to help others who've been through this feel less shame, to feel more empowered, to show them what I did to get through it, all that stuff. And I love that this is what she did after going through something like that. So after trying to like have a normal life and realizing that she couldn't, she began to imagine herself as a poster child for having survived shame. And she became an anti-bullying activist, a TV producer, and the host of a podcast called Reclaiming. Now, I've never seen any of these things, so maybe they're great. Maybe they suck. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you've seen any of it. But the point is that she did not let these people bury her, because, and she even says later on, hold on, I'll get to it. She said, I had a real turning point moment when I learned about Tyler Clementi, who was an 18-year-old freshman, basically who had been secretly filmed being intimate with a man and was shamed to the point he jumped off a bridge. This is what, like, people who are survivors of horrific things, oftentimes it goes one of two ways. Either a life of self-destruction or even taking their own life, or finding a way to heal from that somehow. And it helps if you have money and resources, which a lot of people do not, and using that experience to try to ensure that it doesn't happen to someone else, or at least help other people who are surviving that to also not end up feeling like they want to die. So she realized there are so many more people, especially young people, who are being publicly shamed. And that's when she said, well, maybe I can be, since I'm already a public figure beyond my desire, how can I use that for good? Now, as we also learn, Giselle Pellico is another person who has tried to help change the narrative. I've done lots of videos on her, and she is a fallible victim. She's not a perfect victim, nor are any victims perfect. And I've talked about, her refusal to see her daughter as a victim of incest and all kinds of stuff. And I actually understand why, unfortunately. But let me know if you want me to talk about that. Like, tell me in the comments. But one of the things that she did was use this awful thing that happened to her because of her husband and the over 100 dudes who brought her over to grape her in her sleep. She opened herself up in her story. Unlike Monica didn't really want that to be public. Anyway, whereas Giselle was like, fuck it. I'm going to make all of them be, I'm going to shame them, right? So this is, I'm making this video because I think with all that's going on, we do need hope, okay? And I love to sometimes focus on the awful things that men are doing and the awful things that like whatever, so that we can educate ourselves and be aware of that and whatever. And I also like to focus on some of the awful things that women are doing to see like how we can learn to not do that and deconstruct this. But I also like to focus on great stuff happening because this to me is very inspiring. So she talks about like one of the things that she had to do as anybody who survived some major trauma like this. So I both started to step into my anger about what happened and also began a decade of very deep and difficult healing work, right? Going back and dealing with this past it takes forever. It is a very long process. It's painful. But on the other side of that is creativity, especially the more I dove into stuff that happened to me, the more creative I began to be. Because it's like Pandora's box. Everything is let out. Like this awful stuff that was so painful. And also this amazing stuff that led to a life of creativity for me. And whether it's monetized or not, and so many other advantages, obviously relationships and everything improved after that, but especially with myself. And she decided to write tell the story to Vanity Fair, and they basically were like, okay, you can try to do a first person essay, or if it's not great, then we can have someone interview you. I was dead set on having my writing be of the level that it could be a first-person essay because it was so important to me that I reintroduced myself directly to people, not through the mediated lens of an interviewer. And I love that. She literally was like, no, I'm telling this story. And, most people are not good writers out of the gate, right? You have to work hard to be a good writer. You have to write, and you have to not use ChatGPT or AI to write. You have to just write and write and write. And I love that she did that. She made herself a good writer to make sure her story was her voice and not someone interpreting her voice through just the framing and the questioning. Now, there's always editors, so of course they're going to have a say in it too. But so after she reintroduced herself, this is the whole point of this video, is this part, okay? Because this is why I really, those of you who are much younger than me, I really appreciate you. I can't tell you how much younger people have changed my mind and opened my mind. And also, if you're older than me, I really appreciate you, because you also help me see from your lived experiences and also the historical context of where I fall into all of this. So anyway, in every area of my life, I always try to have mentors who are older than me and mentors younger than me. I think it's so important. They also keep me in check and my ego in check. Anyway, sorry, a little off topic, but early responses came in from older generations, the ones who had been around during what we called the brainwashing in my family. And I think it was mixed at first, right? Like when they saw this, some of the older some Gen X were like, whatever. Then there's Gen X that like me that are like, yeah, right? Especially like in 2017 when Me Too really blew up. The shift came when younger people who hadn't lived through it were coming to the story with just the facts. And that I love. This is why I love even reviewing TV shows and things, even books, but especially TV shows and movies that I grew up with. For people who've never even seen them, for them to see what we were conditioned with, for me to see what I was conditioned with. It helps me forgive myself. It helps me understand that this wasn't just my own stuff. It was not just my pick-meism, and we all have a little pick-me, and it was a spectrum. But this was a collective brainwashing of patriarchy, which also includes white supremacy and culture and ableism and heteronormative agenda, capitalism, and all those things, right? But the brainwashing is so deep, and that's why I do so many movie reviews, which I got to do one soon because I love doing them. They're just very time consuming. If you made it this far, say yay movie review and let me know one that you want to see, because I have a long list of the ones I want to do. But the important point is that the younger generation, they didn't have all of this brainwashing. They didn't have their own memory of the story, right? Lorena Bobbitt, I just remember thinking as a kid, like, what, that crazy bitch, right? And so I had to unlearn all that by listening to her story and then I was like, oh my God, I felt awful. Whereas young people, they just hear the facts and they're like, this is messed up. They looked at this and said, how is it that a 24-year-old person, and I think it started when she was 22, with the least amount of power in this situation, had the largest consequences for what happened. And this is really important to keep in mind with any situation. Always ask who has the least amount of power in this situation and give those people the benefit of the doubt. Doesn't mean those people are always wrong, are always right, but that means that chances are the conditioning to not believe the person with the least amount of power is so high that they deserve way more of a benefit of the doubt than the person with the most amount of power. And this comes also not just with patriarchy, but especially with racism, anything involving work and who is like the boss and versus the people who, like in every situation. Doesn't mean you don't hear the facts. It's just that chances are we are socially conditioned to blame her. We don't even know it. We're socially conditioned to blame the victim in almost every situation, unless that victim has way more systemic power, and then we may believe somebody who's lying. You know what I'm talking about? I'm specifically talking about all of the terrorism that happened during Reconstruction in the South against the Black community. But that's another video I talk about this a lot. People's History of the United States is a great place to start if you don't know what I'm talking about. She talks about how there's an invisible thread that connects all of us women who go through an experience of public shaming. It doesn't matter how big or how small. And she goes on to just talk about how just women being able to tell their own story without the lens of all the systemic stuff. The 90s and 2000s were this period of real dehumanization, cruel treatment of women in the public eye. The interviewer was asking about that. And she talks about the 90s is when you start to see this clash of women owning their sexuality, but still being shamed for that and trying to move forward in the workforce. Also the rise of the religious rights. Also other facts, and I forget about these facts. That's why the historical context is so important. I forget how different it was back then. And she also talks about the CNN was the only one that was on a 24-hour news cycle, and then MSNBC, and then Fox, and then all, like now it never stopped. She even talks about how, Tarana Burke, the creator of, then the leader of the Me Too movement, helped her realize what an abuse of power that was. They also go into how things were just so different in terms of the language. Back then, they didn't use the word gaslighting. And Lewinsky adds, in 98, slut shaming wasn't a word. Fat shaming wasn't a word. Cyberbullying wasn't a word. She talks about how when she was in her therapist's office, she was talking about something difficult that had happened as a teen. And she said, that's an unwanted sexual experience. We didn't have language for that. And we didn't. And then the interviewer said, we didn't even have the word consent. And yeah, we really weren't talking about consent. I think our first video, I was like, was like two teapots talking to each other, using tea as a metaphor for consent. I love this thing that she added here, is that important part of moving forward is excavating the past. To have progress and to force change, you really do need to reckon with the past, which is sometimes a really unpleasant process. And it's also a reminder of why we are where we are right now. The United States, white people especially, refusal to deal with the past, the foundation of genocide that our country was built on, and how the country was, sure, built partly by immigrants, but it was built by chattel slavery, right? Like, we will not reckon with that. Definitely won't pay reparations. Definitely won't reckon with patriarchy and all this other stuff that is, like, if we do not deal with our past, we will stay in this crap. So anybody who's always like, why are you talking about racism all the time? Everything's not about race. Yes, it is. We need to talk about it more. This is why we can't, just like if you got a bunch of trauma from your past, stuff from your past, and you don't deal with it, it will inform everything you do. It will come out some way or another, and it's not good. So whether it's the Monica Lewinsky stuff or literally the foundation of the United States, about even this whole trad life stuff, it's all a lie. None of that's true, right? It is a bullshit. If we actually, all of our grandmas were hostages, right? But they're sitting here glamorizing, not all, but most, but basically all, because even if grandma loved grandpa, she still had to be with him. If she didn't have money, and she probably didn't have money because women couldn't have money, especially the more marginalized. So I love that in this moment, there's moments where we're being forced to go back to the past. And right now, with all this crap coming up about this D-bag and Epstein and all that, every time this comes up, we are forced to go back and look at things differently. And I don't know, talk about the truth and what actually happened. I mean, Monica Lewinsky has reinvented herself. I mean, look at this woman. She's doing fine. And I love that this thing that I can't imagine being 22 years old going through what she went through. It could have destroyed her. And I believe one of the reasons why she's doing so great is because she chose to embrace it, because she had no other choice. There was no going back. Everyone knew her name. So she figured out a way to use this traumatizing experience in the media and with this man to figure out a way forward. And she talks about how the way people talked about her back then, those experiences still impact me today. Of course, she may be thriving today, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if every time she's talked about, there's a level of like, oh God, oh God, oh God. And just for anyone who didn't know, I didn't know this till I read this article, that this whole thing happened. It led to the first presidential impeachment in 130 years over his affair with an intern. And back to Kenneth Starr. He was reviled by many as a Schmegs-obsessed inspector who took this whole matter too far. In fact, when they asked her after he died to comment on it, this is a very classy answer. I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, I feel like she was being a little too nice, but this is a very classy answer. This man, who she wrote, said that he made her life a living hell. She said, when he died, she said, assume many can understand my thoughts about Ken Starr. Just look this up if you really want to. Like the way that they just went after her, brought up complicated feelings. But of more importance, it is that I imagine it's a painful loss for those who loved him. And isn't that the truth? Because no matter how awful these men are in their public life or whatever, there's always a bunch of people in their life that love them, who are probably really messed up too. But anyway, very classy answer. Even when she ran into him much later, Ken Starr asked me several times if I was doing okay. A stranger might surmise from his tone that he was actually worried about me over the years. His demeanor, almost pastoral, was somewhat between oh my God, I don't know that word. I'm gonna have to look that word up. avuncular and creepy. He kept touching my arm and elbow, which made me uncomfortable. Given that he is buddies with Epstein, then nothing seems surprising. I turned and introduced him to my family, bizarre as it may sound. I felt determined then and there to remind him that 20 years before, he and his team of prosecutors hadn't hounded and terrorized just me, but also my family, threatening to prosecute my mom if she didn't disclose the private confidences I had shared with her, hinting that they would investigate my dad's medical practice and even deposing my aunt with whom I was eating dinner that night. And so she meets him out and she's with her family and she's like, here's my family. The ones you terrorized and tried to ruin. I love that she said all this and then she was like, well, I'm reminding this man, he's an absolute D-bag. And I also just want to remind you that even though the media has gotten better, they still do this. The New York Times has had quite a couple weeks with headlines. How did women ruin the workplace? And even this one. In the Matt Gaetz scandal, a 17-year-old was left vulnerable to exploitation. Well, that's one way to put it. A homeless teenager who wanted money for braces ended up having schmegs for money with a powerful man. I'm sorry, but if she's a teenager, I swear to God, they hate schmegs workers so much that even if it's a child, a teenager who is doing it to pay for braces and is homeless, they're still going to paint her as a working girl who fully consented to this and not him as a rapist. Anyway, the way they frame, even now, these Epstein, some of these Epstein titles are so offensive. They keep talking about, Megyn Kelly, whatever, I'm not even going to her. But they keep talking about children as if they are adults. They keep saying the word women when they're talking about underage women. That is not the word. Children, teenagers, those are the words. Underage women is not that doesn't exist. You're literally contradicting it anyway. So, just want to remind you, there's a lot of work to do. We have a lot farther to go, obviously. But I just like to remind people, like, look how far this woman came. Look, that where we have come. There has been so much change between when I was a teenager and me being, this is my birthday week. I turned 48 on Sunday. At 48 versus 30 years ago? The world has changed massively. The world has changed, and not like in terms of how we talk about things. In terms of I have learned learning about all of my biases, learning about all of this indoctrination, white supremacy culture, patriarchy, all of the isms, understand, we have moved the needle so far in such a short period of time. And I find that hopeful. I know we're going backwards in some way, but I personally like to believe an extinction burst, one that could, prove so detrimental, but at the same time, I don't believe that as a whole, we can up here go back. We can't go back, right? Which is important why we have to keep talking about this and make sure that the younger people are not being radicalized by all of those people. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. Again, this is not a deep dive on Monica. This is literally I could probably have to do 4 hours of videos for that. And there's too many things I want to talk about, but thanks for listening to this. Join my Patreon if you want. I'm actually having a watch party tonight in a couple hours, or today in East Coast time in the afternoon. I do watch parties, I do lives, I talk about my travels, I talk about my personal life, I do all kinds of stuff over there. Thank you, Patreon people, for keeping me going. Let me know if you heard that comment song. Mo's is homecoming song. Mo's homecoming song. We went to get Mo's in the country at Grandma and Grandpa's house and got Mo's homecoming song and saw some goats and the other stuff. It is super foggy, but Mo's is home and his sweet baby he's already asleep because he's just so excited, and seriously, he really missed me. Anyway, comment song. This is a terrible comment song. Et voila!